A Dark Epiphany by Joan Harthen. The winter, with its bad news and grey days, had been chased away by a warm wind carried on the Gulf Stream. Today the early morning sun was shining on the coconut-scented gorse and casting a yellow sprinkling of spring over Dartmoor. I'd left the old Victorian country house as soon as the sun was up, eager to explore my surroundings before the real work began, and I'd only been walking 10 minutes when something glinting in the distance caught my eye. I set off over the moor to investigate, and found a foal struggling to be born, still wrapped in its glistening amniotic sheath, and lying half in and half out of its mother. It was kicking its legs furiously, trying to free itself, or perhaps it wasn't happy at being evicted from its warm, dark nest. The exhausted mare, with neck outstretched and head thrust backwards, was whimpering. I wanted to help, but wild ponies are just that, wild, and are best left to their own devices. Still, I couldn't leave. I sat down a sensible distance away and waited until the new life was fully birthed, feeling every pang of the long, painful labour. It was a powerful omen because this day was to be a new beginning for me too. I had travelled 400 miles to take part in a shamanic initiation into darkness in order to see the energy that hides behind our perception of the world. I was back at the house before 9, eager to start the work, but sitting cross-legged on the floor is not easy, and soon my legs were screaming to be released. The woman on my left was fidgeting and it was distracting. The man on my right was breathing heavily, bathing me in a breeze of yesterday's food. I think of the fall. Sometimes the pain of others is worse than our own, for we feel helpless and can't escape it. We're all jumbled up together, you see, inextricably linked. So my comrade's halitosis is also my halitosis, and I tell myself I should rejoice in the sharing of it. The shaman lights a bundle of white sage and begins a purification ritual of smudging, which involves using large feathers to waft the smoke over each individual in turn, all around the circle. It's a risky business because glowing embers are flying off in all directions. When my turn comes, I breathe deeply, inhaling the smoke and eliminating the bad odour. It's very calming. There's a mystery and magic lying beneath the everyday world, and this descent into darkness will help us to see the energy from which all things arise. Once seen, the eddies and flow of this energy can be used to move us through life, like fish swimming effortlessly downstream. Preparations finished, the world feels warm and safe. The shaman speaks in low tones of what is to come, warning that this is not for the faint-hearted. 5 days in total darkness and silence can be frightening, for it can bring out the demons that visit us when the hour is late and darkness is everywhere. I feel a bubbling in my stomach, exciting, nauseating. My head tells me it's the rush of adrenaline. My heart tells me it's the energy stirring. The first person is summoned to the place of ceremony and groans as he falls and is accepted into the darkness. One by one they fall, reaching out into the unknown for answers to their questions, reasons for their life, the purpose of their soul journey. I feel a tap on my shoulder. It's my turn. It's hard to stand. Legs grown accustomed to restricted circulation cannot suddenly spring into life, and I hobble across the floor to where the shaman is kneeling. I'm trembling. I feel like a small child wanting to kick and scream and run away. My mouth is dry and my tongue rubs against my gums like sandpaper on parchment. I kneel on the bare wooden floor in a patch of sunlight that's streaming in through the large window. The wood feels warm and I detect a faint smell of old polish and cedar oil. I glance up into the light one more time. We've already said our goodbyes to the sun, and as we did so, a halo had appeared around it, another auspicious omen, a sign that profound work was about to begin. Our ancestors knew the importance of this goodbye. They, more than us, knew that death stalks us every day of our life, and that each dying sun could be the last one we ever see. I try to steady myself. The dizziness worries me. I feel the shaman's hand on my forehead. He's kneeling behind me and pulls my head back onto his shoulder, calling to the spirits of the air and the land, summoning his teachers and his ancestors. I hear the screech of owl and the cry of eagle. The soft howling and growling of wolves and wild cats underplay it like a symphony. The shaman whispers in my ear sacred sounds that no one else can hear, and I fall into a soft oblivion, a sweet place of peace where I could stay forever. I'm led back to my place in the circle with a blindfold that shuts out every glimmer of the world. I have been accepted into the darkness and must now move in a different world. Others are summoned, and I see their light, their energy. One clothed in red with eyes that shine like fire. Another is made from wood and leather, their sadness pouring out like a meandering muddy river following its well-worn course. Yet another has kachinas dancing round their head, full of gaiety and laughter. The shaman has a huge bulging chest that looks like a ripe pumpkin about to burst. And the darkness, well, that was something else. The darkness changed as the days passed, at first full of light and shapes that came and went, intriguing, fascinating, sometimes frightening, but always moving. But then came stillness, a deep, palpable nothingness. Yet there was something. You could feel it, taste it. It wasn't unpleasant. It embraced me in a primeval warmth. In the room where the drums were kept, there was a heap of it in the middle of the floor. Each time I entered, it slothed towards me, silently, moving like a slime mould, welcoming me. I didn't recall, but I didn't invite it either. I just watched it. I watched the darkness as it moved, reaching out and then receding, only to reach out again, like a sea of soft, warm mud. One day it shape-shifted into a large creature like Jabba the Hutt in Star Wars, slithering towards me and enveloping me completely. Its touch was warm, loving, like being in the womb. I go back to that space sometimes when I'm feeling lonely and small and unloved. This creature of the dark universe, an androgynous energy that permeates all things, remained in the drumming room the whole week, but in the rest of the house the darkness was constantly changing. The bright colours and shapes gave way to darkness, and then out of the darkness came people, hordes of people, dressed in coarse brown sackcloth and white wimpoles. They followed me about, clutching at my garments, begging me to help them, but yet never making a sound. They tried to lead me into places I didn't want to go, tried to show me things I didn't want to see. Their eyes were full of suffering, and sometimes their faces would contort in masks of agony. Was I right to turn away from them? One day I heard someone sobbing, stifled and quiet. I made my way towards them, moving now as though I were sighted. I found a woman alone and laid my hand on her shoulder and brushed away her tears. She reached out and took my hand, squeezing it hard, a meeting of souls in the darkness. The encounter, unfettered by the conventions imposed by sight, was open and honest, a demonstration of pure human love and compassion. Healing energy passed back and forth between us, not words. It was the love that permeates all things in our universe, the love that sustains all life. I felt enriched by it. It wasn't long after that the poor souls who had been following me disappeared and left me in peace. They were replaced by an energy I could neither describe nor understand, an energy of place rather than of people, a timeless energy that shifted and moved as I walked through the days. This energy was strongest outside in the gardens and down by the river, causing a mythical landscape to rise up unbidden. One day we formed a human chain and became wolves, running with the pack, hunting food. I could feel the hunger and the sense of urgency to kill so that we could survive. When the pack fell upon its imaginary prey, saliva filled my mouth and the sweet smell of fresh meat filled my nostrils. Oh, what joy to be alive, to be a part of this cohesive social group, to take part in so sacred a communion. The spiritual feast ended when a sheep strayed into our midst and tried to nudge us out of her grazing patch. Hilarity exploded like thunder, and the whole pack collapsed into raucous laughter. Our exuberance lasted until supper time, and in an effort to give vent to our joy and yet still being in silence, we began to communicate in animal noises. It's amazing the complexity of speech that can be conveyed using bars, neighs, woofs and meows. Eventually we were silenced by the shaman, who reminded us of the solemnity of the work. On the 5th day I plucked up courage to venture outside alone. The gardens were sloping and a deep river ran along the southern edge. Trees grew all around, some tall and grand like oak and chestnut, others small and spreading like hawthorn and witch hazel. Having moved with ease around the house, out here I was blind, groping and feeling my way through the foliage, trying to avoid the wayward branches that fingered the air. One tree invited me to rest in its arms, drawing me into the heart of its strong body as if I were a subservient lover. Energy flowed from its roots to mine, backwards and forwards, building up to a crescendo until the drumming called me back to the house. All too soon it was time to welcome the sun back into our lives. I sat on the grass under a dome of blanket, waiting for permission to remove the blindfold, not knowing if I was the foal I'd seen on that first day struggling to be born, or if I was the mare suffering birthing pangs. I didn't want to leave the warmth of the dark womb where I'd felt a part of everything, not separate, and yet I wanted to be free of the inevitability of pain that comes when we know we must give birth to something new. Shielding my eyes against the explosion of colour, I pushed myself out into the light, and oh, what a sight it was that greeted me. The grass was so green it made me weep, the sky so blue I nearly drowned in it. Yet through my tears of joy the words of T.S. Eliot slipped gently into my mind. I had seen life and death, but had thought they were different. This birth was hard and bitter agony for us, like death, our death. I returned to my life, but I was no longer at ease in the familiar ways. I had looked into the darkness. I had seen the beating heart of the universe and had been changed by it. Nothing would ever be the same again.